I'd like to call to order, is this microphone on? It is. Okay, so I'd like to call to order the Speech Language Pathology Practice Committee at 1:10, no, that's not right, 2:10 p.m. And we'll begin with a roll call. Dee?
Here. Speech language pathologist, board member.
And is it just, and our legal, is it everyone who's sitting up front here right now?
Here's Debbie.
Oh, Debbie, you're just in time. We are doing the roll call for the Speech Language Pathology Practice Committee.
Yes.
So take a breath.
I'll introduce myself, Paul Sanchez, Executive Officer.
I'm Noreen Marks, I'm from the legal office at DCA.
And you're, I introduced myself. My turn. Okay, Debbie Snow, public member.
And Patty Solomon Rice, Speech Language Pathologist, Chair of the Speech Language Pathology Practice Committee. So our first order of business is kind of humorous. We're going to be approving our meeting minutes from, wait for it, November 6, 2014.
So this is the last time we had a,
This is the last time we had a Speech Language Pathology Practice Committee meeting. So it has been a while. If I can have a motion to approve the meeting minutes, please?
I had a couple, I didn't, can I?
We'll ask for discussion. Well, I don't know that
I know
you,
I
people that
can't.
are not on the committee.
I usually ask members of the committee, any members who are not on the committee to observe and not participate so that there is not a call to the board. My name is spelled wrong. That's all.
okay, gotcha.
That was back when we were misspelling Allison's name in 2000.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Well, we'll remember to mention that up front. So at any rate, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion, so motion.
Debbie has approved the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dee Parker has seconded them. Some discussion about any name spellings. I'll go ahead and say it. So we have under the call to order, no, that's not right. We have under guests present, Allison Grimes is with one L rather than two. Any other changes to the minutes?
Noreen, do you have a microphone? Oh, just in case, okay. Just for future reference.
If there are no other changes. There are no other changes to the minutes. Let's go ahead and take a vote to approve. We'll go around the table, say yes or no, or abstain.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, okay, the minutes are approved from November 6, 2014. The next item on our agenda has to do with, let me find my agenda item. Here we go. It has to do with a discussion and possible action regarding the approval process for speech-language pathology assistance training programs. And I'll just give an introductory bit of information about that. We have the Business and Professional Code 2538.1B2, and that particular code authorizes the board to approve SLPA training programs. At the February board meeting, the board discussed our need for revisiting this approval process and delegated the task to us, the Speech Language Pathology Practice Committee. There are currently 7 approved SLPA training programs in California, and what has happened is the board has now received an inquiry from one potential applicant who is interested in setting up a new SLPA program in the state. So what we would like to do is discuss objectives and tasks that are necessary to approve SLPA training programs in the future. So what we did is we invited a couple of SLPA coordinators to provide us with some input about their SLPA programs. And these consisted of Sue Kidwell, Kidwell. She is the SLPA coordinator from San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton. And we also invited Christina Zagic, Z-A-G-I-C. She is the SLIPA coordinator from the American River College in Sacramento, and they were going to provide us with information about their SLIPA programs. As it happened, we were intending to have a conference call with them at today's meeting, but it just simply wasn't possible to set up what needed to be set up to have a conference call. Our intention was a few things. We were going to talk about what our end objective was going to be for the SLIP approval process. We were going to talk about what steps we would need to take to meet this particular end objective, and we were also going to talk about who was going to be completing these steps and when those steps should be completed. But because we are unable to conduct this conference call, what we're going to have to do at this point is table this particular discussion. And what we would like to do in the near future is set up a notified meeting of the Speech Language Pathology Practice Committee, and we'll have a conference call that we know that we'll be able to have a conference call and include Ms. Kidwell and Ms. Zajac in the particular discussion. And it sounds like, Dee, you also have some other individuals who might be interested in participating in that conference call as well.
Yes. The people down south.
So perhaps you can get me the names of them. I'm sure I can find their email addresses.
Yes,
but
and
yeah.
the college where they're at.
Yeah,
Community
exactly.
college where they're at.
Right, that would be great. And then when we can set up, an email exchange to find a day and time when everyone's available and set up that conference call. So,
Patty, when do you see us having these meetings?
well, I'd sure like to get this started before our next August meeting. So
Okay.
I would foresee us having this sometime between May and August.
Does the school year or anything affect what? you
Well, I think
think?
it'd be easiest to have between May and August because the
Okay.
community, because schools will be closed. Although I believe that the community colleges have summer programs. But that's our intention, to get this going between now and our August meeting, so we will have something to report.
So
at
perhaps
August.
as early as June in Sacramento? Late June, something like that?
Well, we're going to do a conference call, so it doesn't have to be in Sacramento,
Oh, okay.
which makes it a lot.
So teleconference meeting, okay.
Yeah, we'll do a teleconference meeting. We'll start out with a teleconference meeting, and if we feel we need to have a face-to-face meeting, then we can talk about that during the teleconference meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Patty, summer will be a better time for Rosemary Scott, who was on the ASHA committee related to development of SLIPA programs and was trained by Lisa O'Connor, who established the SLIPA programs in the state of California. And at CASHA, we had a long talk about what should be done, and she said she would love to participate and help us write that, because it isn't clear for people who want to start a program and for ongoing programs. So since she's admin now, summer would be a much lighter time, and she would probably be able to spend more time with us.
Yeah, and she'd be a wonderful addition
Yeah.
as well. And I think for both you and me, summer is also an easier time. I don't know about Sue or Christina, but at any rate, so we'll go ahead and do that. And I'll be in touch with you, Paul, and maybe
Okay.
we'll figure out, we'll get started on it.
Okay.
And that is all that is on our SLP Practice Committee agenda for today. So are there any other issues of concern that anyone, I don't think we can. This is what was noticed, so.
You can have public comment for items on the agenda to see what might be on the
Sure,
agenda, and you can also take public comment on this particular item.
sure. So do we have any comments from the public who are not members of the licensing board? Yes.
Sean Green with Speech Pathology Group. I just-
Oh, hi, Sean. I didn't see you out there.
Go up to the table,
Oh, sure.
please. Thank you. Sorry.
So just a couple things. The first thing, I just name correction, Christina Zykes, like yikes.
Zykes. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank
she's
you.
wonderful. The other question I had was regarding the SLPA programs and the possibility of increasing them, what the current need is for more additional programs, considering what the job market may look like for SLPAs. I know here in Northern California, we have a lot of SLPA graduates where we can't find positions for them. So I'm just wondering if that may come up as well with this group.
Can I answer that? Or,
Is it related to this topic of the process for SLPA training program?
I think the question is if it's in the scope of what we're discussing with the SLPA approval.
yeah, I don't recall, Brianne's not here. I don't know what program, what the location is of the program that wants to apply to become a SLPA program.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily in the scope of talking about the approval process, but it's something that the board can consider as a point of discussion for later.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it is true that we're more in need of SLP programs than we are on SLPA programs,
Right.
yes.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
May I
Thanks.
tell you what is going on down south? The ones that do complete a SLPA training program get hired, and generally right away.
I'm so happy to hear that. Wonderful, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Any other comments from the
I
public?
want to comment, it's not relevant to this discussion, because
But you're-
2 days ago, was my first encounter with a session, with a speech there.
Sir,
Wait,
we can't hear you on the phone.
But
Hold
also,
on,
you're on the
I'm not-
board, so you weren't
So
really
board members
supposed
just
to
have to
speak.
hold off
Not
until,
allowed to give a comment?
no.
Okay,
That's
no,
sir.
nothing, okay, it was not.
You know what, when we have our full board meeting and we're
Yeah,
going
no,
over
I-
this, then you can give your comment. So with that in mind, I think we can go ahead and adjourn the Speech Language Pathology Practice Committee meeting at 2:20.
I just want to be clear that members of the public can comment.
He's a board member.
Oh, he's a board member.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know the language, sorry.
That's okay. Okay.
We are adjourned. We're
Yes.
adjourned? Okay. Bless you. I just had to say that about the spelling of my name, sorry.
Do you remember that at the beginning for some reason? I kept putting 2 L's in there. So that was probably on me, because
It's been-
that was a month after I got here.
It's been the story of my life. It's
Just-
okay. I answer to anything.
Part of that was that we just had hired Anita Joseph as our enforcement coordinator. So that tells you how we, and Karen, yeah. That's right.
Am I audible? Yes. Good, thank you. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Speech Language Pathology, Audiology, and Hearing Aid Dispenser Board. I'd like to start by having roll call. Debbie?
Debbie Snow, Public Board Member. Dee Parker, Speech Pathologist, Board Member.
We want to start with the board members and then we'll go to.
Oh, okay, sure.
Rodney Diaz, Public Board Member, otolaryngologist.
Amnon Shalev, hearing a dispenser, board member.
Marcia Raggio, Board Member Audiologist.
Patty Solomon Rice, Board Member, Speech Language Pathologist.
I can't remember if I introduced myself. So, once again, Allison Grimes, Board Member, Audiologist. And staff?
Paul Sanchez, Executive Officer.
I'm Noreen Marks from the DCA Legal Office.
Karen Robinson, board staff.
Anita Joseph, Board Staff.
Dennis Van Vliet, audiologist.
Sean Green, speech pathologist.
Great, thank you. We have a quorum. So I'd like to begin this morning, it's not morning. I'd like to begin this afternoon with, is there any public comment for items that are not on the agenda so that they can be placed on the agenda at a future time? Dennis Van Vliet.
Yes, we didn't see on the agenda the topic of Assembly Bill 1601, Bloom, hearing aids for minors. So this would require that in health insurers provide benefits for children. I think it's particularly a good time with the confusion that's coming up with over-the-counter hearing aids and so on to ensure that we have a proper channel for kids. And with the problems that CCS has had for decades in that they're so hidebound into regulations and not being able to pay properly and so on, this would be a good solution to get services to the kids sooner. So I think the board should take it up and evaluate it and come up with a statement about supporting it or not.
Cool, thank you.
Yes.
No, Sean, nothing? Okay, very good. Thank you. Turning now to item number 3, under tab 3 of the full board, you will see meeting minutes that need to be approved. Let's start with the meeting minutes for February 9/10. Are there any edits to those meeting minutes? I noticed at the bottom, these are, the bottom of page 5, there's an incomplete sentence, and I'm not quite sure where we were going with the sentence. Ms. Pruden reviewed with the board changes, and then it kind of dwindles off into nothingness. And then we have a motion
Do you have that?
at the top of the next page, so I felt that was a little disconnected there. And I wasn't sure what the motion was. Oh, move to approve, okay, well, hello. Anyway, the last line on page 5 is error in order to have the, and then it just ended there, so. Cool.
Did you know what that was supposed to say? I think that was just simply the reference to the disciplinary guidelines and the reference to uniform standards, and that they had to be separated.
Yeah.
So it's just a clarification
Okay.
of the reference, right? Okay.
Okay. Are there,
Also-
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the same page, under number 13, third paragraph down, starting with discussion, that first sentence looks disjointed, and I'm not sure where it was going either. Discussion by the board included the expansion of the scope of practice, have to test for these services which may have significant fiscal implications, and the tympanometry.
I noticed that too, Marcia.
So something wrong with that whole sentence.
Yeah, I think maybe it was meant to be the necessity that we would have to test for these procedures, which may have significant fiscal implications, period. Finally, tympanometry is not a hearing test
Yeah.
that is necessary for the fitting and selling of hearing aids. Yeah. Anything else on those board minutes? And then we also have the March 30 minutes. Is that in the same, yeah, that's the same tab. The teleconference meeting, March 30. Are there any edits to those meeting minutes?
Do we want to take a motion to discuss it first?
Oh, we can't do it all together?
I think it's cleaner to do.
Okay, let's have a motion, please, to approve the minutes as amended for the February 9th meeting.
So move.
Second? Second. Thank you. Is there any further discussion of those meeting minutes? Let's take a vote by roll call. Debbie?
Yes. Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so those minutes are approved with the amendments that will occur. Now let's move to the March 30th minutes. I had one question, and this just may be my memory. So on the second page, the move to oppose the bill, and Jamie Lee abstained, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't remember. Any other questions on those meeting minutes? Is there a motion to accept those minutes?
I move. Second.
Thank you. And roll call vote, Rodney?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. And We will now move to an update on the Bagley Keene Open Meetings Act. And Noreen's going to, I'm sorry, Noreen, I'm blanking on your last name. Marks. Noreen Marks is going to give us an update. And that's under tab 4. We'll discuss some changes to the Open Meetings Act.
Well, I'm going to presume that most of the board members have attended a board meeting orientation training where you've gotten some training in the Open Meetings Act already. So I'm just going, it's just a time to review and give you the updates, make sure everyone got the update for 2017. The legal office puts out an update each year to indicate whether or not there are any changes to Bagley Keene Open Meeting Act. And you have that memo from the legal office dated February 6, 2017. It lays out 3 of the changes that took place that are effective this year. The first one is related to the state bar, which isn't really terribly relevant for this group. The second one is about non-English speakers and indicating that a state body must allow more time for a non-English speaker to make comments if that person is using a translator. And then the third one is about the Victims' Compensation Board, which is also not particularly relevant for this group. So I don't think there's anything that it comes up very frequently. I don't, potentially, obviously, number 2, if you have non-English speakers who come to make comments, who are using translators, then those people are entitled to have more time. I don't know how often it is that you feel like you need to limit public comment, so I don't know for this body how often that's going to be an issue. So this is just really a time to remind everybody about what the purpose is for Bagley Keene Open Meetings Act. They applied all to most of the state bodies, to this state body. It's really to ensure transparency in the work that is done by the state body. The people's work is supposed to be done in public, with opportunities for them to comment, and the consequences are something to think about. You may have an action that the board has taken invalidated. You could be subject to misdemeanor penalties if there's a violation. So the rules are important to follow. It is really important to remember that all the state bodies do the people's work, do the work of the public, and that work is supposed to be transparent and available to the public. So you have in here the top 10 rules for the Open Meetings Act. I think mine was kind of behind. It was sort of behind the memo. It's really a separate document. It was behind the memo that was attached to the update for the Open Meetings Act. So it's just a reminder that meetings are in public. They must be noticed with 10 days' notice and posting. The agenda is required to tell the public what is going to be discussed, and items that are not on the agenda cannot be discussed. And it's required where there is a meeting under the definition of the act, which is the majority of a board of 3 people or more. So those are sometimes that is sometimes the requirement that a lot of the boards struggle with, which is, well, if we're creating a committee, how many people can we have on it? If there's a group of people, a loose group of people, how many can we have until we can't discuss the subject matters are within the jurisdiction of the board. So additionally, you have to allow for public comment on any of the items before, during the discussion. Different boards do it differently depending on what the topic is. I like to just remind the boards that even if you've allowed for public comment during the discussion of an item, if there is then a motion, I always ask for public comment, because the public is entitled to, after the discussion, make comments on what the specific motion is that will outline the act that the body is going to take. Then there are some rules around closed sessions, and the closed session can only be for certain items, as I'm sure you know. And of course, the one that isn't on the list of subject matter for closed session are items that people simply don't want to talk about in public. Unfortunately, items that are simply uncomfortable or, you know, embarrassing, there is no closed session item in the law for that.
You don't think you could change that law?
Me personally?
Yeah, sure.
I'll get right on that.
Thank you.
There's no secret ballots, there's no proxy voting, and then meetings by teleconferencing have particular rules as well. And so I created a sort of a top 10 list for teleconference meetings, and that's going around, and I've just lost my copy of that. Oh, thank you. So, you know, what's particularly important for a teleconference meeting is that all the locations must be accessible to the public. So this sometimes creates challenges, particularly for the staff when they're putting together an agenda, because we are all busy, and I understand there are sometimes people don't know exactly where they're going to be at the time that the meeting is scheduled for, and the staff has to know. So just be aware, if you're thinking that you want to participate by teleconference, that you're going to need to know where you're going to be and where you're going to be able to call in from in enough time for the staff to be able to get it on the agenda. That location has to be accessible to the public. So if it's your home, you have to make it accessible to the public, and it needs to be ADA accessible. So if it's at your home, you need to make sure that it is accessible.
I never thought about that, but that's a really interesting point.
Yeah. So, if you live in a gated community, you must be able to arrange for the public to get in and out. I have some notes on here, but you can't not participating in your car. And some of that is because we have had board members ask, I park in slot number L35. Can we notice that? The answer is no, you can't. As I have told some of my board members, a license plate number is not an address, so you have to be at a place that's accessible to the public.
The car is Mini Cooper. And
yeah. We've also had people ask, can we notice it for the hotel bar? No, you can't, because that is not open to all members of the public. You have to be 21 to get in. There must be suitable audio technology, so you have to have a speakerphone. If there are members of the public there, they have to be able to hear what's going on. So let's not let technology kind of get in the way. Make sure that that's available. And most of the, you know, we've had people participate with their cell phones. They put them on speaker, and you just have to be aware that you need to have the technology to do that. And the board member, if you're at a location, you must be there for the entire or it must be available for the entire duration of the meeting. So if you can't stay, you need to make sure that that location continues to be open and the technology continues to be available for any members of the public who come to that location. And the location must be available for if there's a closed session before and after, because there are a lot of times after a closed session, the only thing that may be in open session is the adjournment, but that does take place in open session. So the place has to be available for the entire time before and after a closed session if there is one. If you leave the meeting before the location before the end of the meeting, you have to be able to keep that location open. We've had that occasionally where someone's in their office, and then we just make sure that there's other office staff to keep the location open for the duration of the meeting. So busy public locations, Starbucks, we've had people calling them from Starbucks or wanting to call them from Starbucks. Not really appropriate unless you can assure a private place to talk where people can actually hear what's going on. And it's almost never going to be acceptable for closed session, just because the nature of the closed session is that it's private, and it'd be pretty difficult to talk about private items that belong in closed session when you're sitting in the middle of a coffee shop. And even for the open session items, sometimes the background noise is very distracting, and not only for the people who are there, but for everyone else who's on the call. So just think about that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So is there, I'm thinking, if someone wanted to participate in the telephonic meeting and they required either a spoken language interpreter or a sign language interpreter, would it be our obligation to, or would it be the public member's obligation to arrange for interpreting services?
The board staff would arrange for services, and I think, I have not had that come up. Generally, you have to provide an accommodation. It's got to be a reasonable accommodation, and if you can have, if you need a signer there, then that would probably take place at the main location. It depends on what the request is, and staff would take care of that, but not necessarily the board member. Unless for some reason it's only going to be necessary at one location, the staff can arrange that, then you would help facilitate it, but it's not, it's staff responsibility to take care of any accommodations that are required.
But then there would be, I'm just thinking of my environment where I normally would have a call. Would there then be the responsibility, would it be let's say a deaf person wanted to participate in the call. Would it be my responsibility to arrange for interpreter services within my hospital, or would I expect magically Paul would reach down to Los Angeles and arrange interpreter services? I mean, unlikely this is going to happen, but it sort of just raises the question in my mind about logistically, what would my responsibility be?
Well, all of our agendas, almost all of the agendas that the department, the bodies in the State Department of Consumer Affairs use, it has a notice at the bottom that says the meeting facility is accessible to persons with a disability. Any person who needs a disability-related accommodation or modification in order to participate may make a request by contacting, in this case, it's Brianna Humphreys at the board, and gives that phone number. And so the staff then would get that request, and we ask people to make the request sufficient time in advance to actually be able to make that accommodation. Because if I'm going to guess if the staff gets it the day before, they may have a real issue with being able to accommodate that person on that.
And
so we ask for
and then my assumption is that the department would bear the financial cost. That I wouldn't expect my medical center to bear the financial cost.
No,
of
the
providing
department, the board would
Interesting.
okay. So I haven't had. I don't think I've had any experience with requests for signers, actually. But that would, depending on what the request is, I think the board staff would talk to the person who's making the request and see what can be done to reasonably accommodate that request. And you may not, I think I'm on number 5, you may not call in to a conference number for the teleconference without having previously arranged to be at your location. And in fact, we had a situation not that long ago, board members said that there was a call-in number on the agenda, I believe it was on the agenda, for members of the public, because sometimes boards will arrange for call-in numbers so people can participate. Or perhaps this person had simply been provided the call-in number and called in and was surprised to find out that she couldn't call in from wherever she was because she had not noticed her location. And she was confused about, well, I was given a call-in number, why can't I call in? And you need to arrange that location in advance, and you can't call in from a location that hasn't been noticed. You can, let's say you assume that there was a meeting at headquarters, and then there were a couple of teleconference meeting sites, and you assumed you were going to come to headquarters, and something happened, your transportation got canceled or delayed, and you said, well, I know there's a teleconference meeting down here in LA where I live. That's fine, as long as you had not previously planned at being at another teleconference location. You can go to a teleconference location. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. If you have an address to a building that's large or has a lot of rooms, hotels, we've actually had meetings in hotel rooms or apartment buildings, make sure that signage is arranged for, that people, if there's a concierge or some room in the, someplace in the bottom, that people are being told where they can go to get to the meeting site. If these rules aren't followed, you may either be precluded from participating or the meeting may be canceled. So for example, if you said, I'm calling in from my house because I got sick and I don't want to infect everybody, if that is not a notice location, you're going to be precluded from participating. If you thought you were going to be at the Starbucks, you had arranged for a room and that's noticed on there, and you said, oh, I'm really sorry, something come up, I can't make it, and that site can't be open to the public, then the meeting would have to be canceled. So when you're doing a roll call for the establishment of the quorum in the beginning, you should ask for each participating location. Is there somebody there? Who's there? And usually we ask too, are there any members of the public there? They're not necessarily required to identify themselves, but we'd like to know if there's members of the public there. If there's a notice location that's not responding, if we're saying, hello, 123 Main Street, is anybody there? And there's no answer, then potentially a meeting will either be delayed or canceled until that location is available. And then during public comment, we ask that every location be asked, is there any members of the public there who have any public comments? And then with teleconference meetings, all votes need to be by roll call vote. It looks like you tend to do roll call votes here anyway, so that's probably something you're used to now. So those are sort of our top 10 rules for teleconference meetings specifically. So are there any questions? Do people have questions about things that have come up, or anything, any challenges or anything people want some updates on? This is unusually silent for a discussion on Bagley Keene.
I've only ever had one occasion where I was at work and my work address was noticed, and somebody actually did come to participate in the call, and I was taking the call in my office, and this woman came in and sat down in my office for the call, and she proceeded to take out her lunch and eat her lunch in my office, and I thought, ew! I mean, I didn't say anything, but I thought, oh, really? I mean, I guess that was okay. It was just peculiar. And this was many years ago, but it stuck with me.
Oh, I would think if you're at a place where, if it says like no, here's the sign that says please no food in this room,
well, yeah,
you would abide by whatever the rules are.
Maybe I'll
for
have to
the
start
location.
putting up that sign now when we have a teleconference. No smoking, no eating, no.
No putting your coffee on my desk while I'm.
Yeah.
I have a question. Can you notice more than one location? Like if I work in 2 different buildings in the hospital and I don't know exactly where I'm going to be at the meeting, can I notice both? If they're both public locations, if I'm going to be at one of them.
You would have to have somebody available at both locations that are on the agenda.
And I could have my nurse say, if anyone comes for this meeting, then they can sit down in this office, and if I'm back in the hospital. So can I notice that if I don't know for sure which place I'm going to be?
Well, usually if there's going to be an additional location that is simply open to the public, and the Open Meetings Act does allow for additional public locations, but we like, if we can, to state that on the agenda, that this is a public location, because I think the expectation of the public is when they go to a teleconference location, that they're going to be able to address a board member. So, ideally, you would notice a location where you're going to be. Or you're going to be running between the two of them, or?
Well, that's the thing, is that if I try to make myself available, and if I'm in like one building of the hospital, but my office is in another building of the hospital, it sort of would make sense for me to do it in my office. But if I'm stuck in the hospital and can't get to my office, then.
But you have a public location in the hospital?
And there would be a public location in both, right? There'd be like a lobby and in the hospital and my office in my office building.
I think what we would probably want to do is somehow work the agenda to make it clear that, you know, that one of the locations may be simply an additional public location. We could work it where, I don't know how far apart are these?
Well, they're walking distance.
It sounds like you would have access, there would be someone there to facilitate
Right,
that
right.
person,
There'd be a
right?
nurse there to
And there would be a phone for them to participate. So in this case, Rod
We
has
could
an
notice it
assistant
where
that
there
would
may
help.
not be a board member, there may not be a board member at one of these two locations, so that if people
You could just put in
from the
parentheses,
public
board member may not be present.
may not be present, so that it looks like an additional, so it is an additional public site. We have had situations where someone has been in a room, conference room, and they get there and they find out it's double booked, and they have to go to a different conference room. When that happens, we say, you need to put up signs, you need to hopefully post somebody to direct somebody somewhere else, and we give people a time to get to a new location. And sometimes that will depend on how far apart they are, because if somebody comes, is taking public transportation, and gets to it and you say, oh no, I'm at a different building, it's 3 miles down the road, that's not the same thing as down the hallway. And there have been times when we've said, we're gonna have to cancel this because we can't expect members of the public to get 3 miles away to a completely different location that's not there in sufficient time to participate. So we could, you know, if that is the situation, we could work it out where, as Mr. Sanchez says, we notice it as this, no board member may be present at this location, something along those lines, so that the members of the public know it's there, it's open, but there may not be a board member there to address. Do we have are there any questions about the rules in general, or teleconference meetings, or anything like that?
That was very helpful.
Okay,
I
good.
really appreciate it.
Good.
I think that was timely. Any other comments on this topic?
Sorry, excuse me. On the general Open Meeting Act, I'm trying to remember where it was. When we vote for disciplinary matters, and that's a closed conference, can somebody request to know how we voted, a member of the public? I may have misunderstood what I read.
Well, I don't know that they would know what we're discussing.
Like, let's say we had a case whether someone should go on probation, and there's a question by a member of the public after the fact. Would they be able to say, I want, for the Open Meeting Act, could I see what each board member voted? The reason I'm bringing it up is I read about this as a controversy for a case on the medical board recently, where a member of the public wanted to know. They had suspicions about whether a board member should have recused themselves or not, and they wanted to know what each board member voted.
So
Well,
can I just clarify something, Noreen? So in this scenario, the member is at the location, they know that closed session disciplinary matters are gonna be discussed, they don't know what's being discussed, but then afterwards, when we're about to adjourn, they say, can I know what was discussed and what the outcome was?
Yes, it's
And
after,
who voted?
it's after the fact. A member of the public, after the fact, went to the media. Sorry, I didn't know which case this was. And they asked the board member, you know, they thought, reading about the case, they thought the board member should have recused themselves from voting. and the board member didn't. So they requested from the legal counsel what each board member voted, including the one they had suspicions about. And the legal counsel said, no, that's private. That's just my question, and if that's ever come up, or if our votes
I have
be
not
made
had that.
public?
Generally, the votes are recorded in the minutes. Closed session minutes are not open to the public.
Okay.
And what board members discuss in closed session, as the saying goes, what happens in closed session stays in closed session. I'm not familiar with this particular case.
I'll find out, so
Where
I have
there
better
has-
specifics for you.
If there has been a recusal and a board member is not voting because of whatever reasons, knows one of the parties or feels like he or she can't be objective, I think I and probably most members of the legal office would say then that person can't participate in the discussion, should not be in the room, and I put recusals on the record so that the order actually would indicate that, could indicate that somebody has recused themselves. I haven't had that. I've had that with decisions that I've written, so because I've written them, I've put it in. I'm not sure I've had it where it's just been an order sheet. But recusals should be noted.
I'll
think it would be
find
safe.
out
I
the
think it would be.
specifics.
I think I know
but
what case you're talking about.
It's
but I
a
think
controversy with the
I think it would
medical
be
board,
safe
yeah.
to just refer them to the board office, and then at that point I could handle that. We do put
Okay.
information in our minutes about the very limited information about closed session. But if they have something specific, they can address
Okay.
it to me, and then if I need legal counsel.
So you think I
can-
know you, it's one that came up in some controversy later where the public
Yes.
said this board member should have recused himself because he knew the person being voted on, and turns out later they had a business deal or something, so
And I
it
don't know
was.
if that was a Bagley Keene issue, but I'm aware of
But
what
you
you're
know,
talking
I'm
about.
sorry, it wasn't
Yes.
Bagley King, but I wondered if, I'm sorry, I
If
I
they're
was
entitled to
thinking
know who
this
voted
would
and who
Right.
didn't vote.
pertain to Bagley
Yeah,
King.
there is a provision in Bagley Keene that says, that essentially says that closed session minutes are not open to the public.
Yes.
It's, I can
Okay.
find the site for, if
I
you-
think I
that
just
particular
read
case, I'm
something
not.
about voting for mail, voting, that I thought it said it had changed to where the vote, whether it was yes or no, would be public. But I
Well,
may be
and for closed session, the voting changed a couple years ago where the Open Meetings Act now requires that in open session items, at least, each board member or vote is recorded. So I don't know how you used to vote, if it was by voice vote or how it was done. You can still choose which way you do it, but it has to be in a way where each person's vote is recorded. So for example, and you can reflect that in different ways. So for example, for the minutes, you voted on the minutes. It could say how many people on the, however many people on the board, it was, 7-0 to adopt the minutes, and then you can list the names of the people who voted aye. Some of the boards have a little graph, so that may be what you're thinking
That may
of.
be what I'm confusing.
Is that each,
So I'm sorry.
no problem at all. That, I'm not sure if most, I think a lot of the boards have now gone to roll call votes for all items, not just when it's a teleconference, which has always required a roll call vote. But the Open Meeting Act does now require that each person's vote is recorded on all the open session items.
Okay.
So that might be something you're thinking about. But with closed session, I'm not aware of that case. I can ask somebody to take a look for it. As I said, closed session minutes are not open to the public. And as I said, I try to put recusals on the record so that it's very clear when a decision goes out that a certain board member has not participated. I don't know if that's done across the board. Anyone else have any questions about? About Mr. Bagley and Mr. Keene?
So I would I would like to take this opportunity to publicly apologize to the members of the board, to the board staff, and to members of the public for violating the Bagley Keene Open Meetings Act back on March 30th of 2017. While I fully intended to be present at my noticed location, an unexpected emergency occurred that morning, made it impossible for me to arrive at the meeting on time. And what I should have done is immediately notify the chair that I would be late for my arrival, but I did not do that. And in the process, I very much inconvenienced many, many people, including a public member who required entrance into my noticed location. So I do want the board to know that this will never, ever happen again. And once again, I apologize to my fellow board members and to the staff and to the public.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the Open Meetings Act? Any comment from the public? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on to item number 5, which is board election of officers. What do you mean, I'm not going to be chair anymore?
That would be
Item number 5, yes. I would like to call for, let's begin with board chair. I personally would like to nominate Dee Parker for election to the position of board chair. Are there other nominations for the position of board chair? Does the public get to nominate people?
This point.
No. I was just thinking my husband would like to unnominate me.
But they
Okay.
can certainly speak to the nominations.
You know better, okay. So we'll vote individually for each position, I assume.
I think that's the easier way.
Okay, all right, so I have nominated Dee to be board chair. Is there a second to my nomination?
I'd like to second that.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Let's take a roll call vote.
And no public
Oh,
comment.
and no public. Anything else you'd like to discuss? Heave a sigh of relief. Okay, Debbie.
Aye.
You could vote for yourself. Sure, why not?
Yes, you can.
Right? Aye.
I vote aye.
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 Yes.
Very good. We have a chair-elect. And is there
That's quite the way we
I even wrote
agreed.
it down how we were going to do it. You should have stopped me. Okay, so do you want to do it?
No,
No, you can just, you can do, no, that won't work. You
no,
can't.
you'll just have to do it.
Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it again. It's so worked out so neatly. I would like to nominate Marcia Raggio to be vice chair of the board.
And I just want to clarify, the board officer positions are for 1 year, for a fiscal year beginning
Beginning in
July 1?
Yep.
Okay.
Is there a
Second.
Thank you. Are there other nominations for vice chair? Public, would you like to, honey, did you want to nominate me for, no, I'm just kidding. Is there further discussion? Okay, I'd like to call for a roll call vote. Rod?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, very good. The motion carries. That was pretty funny. Okay, moving on, we'll have the executive officers report, item number 6 on the agenda.
I'm going to ask that everyone bear with me. I don't have a written report, but I can certainly provide an oral report to kind of go over some of the areas to discuss in the board office. Yes, thank you. I've been attacked by allergies recently, and I've been out of the office for a few days, so bear with me. First thing I want to talk about is we have some budget reports that we've included in your board binders, and the first is an analysis of the fund condition. And I always think it's good to just kind of see, when we start talking about revenue and expenditures, this kind of affects our discussion about fee increases and that kind of thing. So if you look at that very first page after tab 6B, you'll see the fund condition there. The first column represents 2015-16, that's a previous year. And that was the last year that we had our general fund loan repayment. So if you look at the total revenue of that first column, we brought in about 2.4 million, and we spent that year about approximately $2 million, 2.1 million. Now, what the state looks at is months in reserve. Months means the number of monthly expenditures that you would be able to sustain, if you had no revenue coming in. So that's something that in budget circles we look at, the number of months in reserve. You don't want to get to the point where you have too many months in reserve, because that means you're collecting too much money from your licensees. And there have been instances in state government where boards have given money back, have given rebates to licensees when they collect too much. So we want to be careful not to do that. But we also want to be careful to bring in enough money to sustain operations at efficient levels. So when we go to the next column, we look at fiscal year 2016, 2017, and that's the year that's about to end. So if you look at those revenues, we're bringing in approximately 1.9, according to this projection. This is an estimate, and we're still spending about 2.1. That gives us about 9 months in reserve. And what I wanted to really show you here is, if you look at our projections moving forward, we're steady, but we're starting to dip into those reserves a little bit. Recently, we had to get an augmentation to our budget in the six-figure realm. I think it was something like 120 to 130,000, so that Anita Joseph could do her job of formal discipline, and that requires, significant funds if you have, cases that can draw on that. So that's something that we will continue to look at. We'll be talking about fund conditions. Fund conditions are a snapshot in time, so they can change. I can bring another fund condition 3 months from now that can be somewhat different. The next few pages are revenue projections. Yes, please.
The reason for the dip from 15-16 to the subsequent years is that we were no longer getting repaid for the money that we had loaned the department. Was that what that was?
Well,
we dipped from 24 down to 19.
I would say yes, and I would say that to see it more as a spike, that 450,000 is more of a spike, but this is based on a very conservative estimate of what our revenue is. If we go to the next few pages, and I think you'll have to look at this more closely. I don't expect you to just jump on this and be able to read this, but at the very end of these two
Can I just
pages,
ask a quick question?
yes,
now?
sure.
So in lieu of no longer having repayments and our months in reserve dipping, is the lowest that we really want to get 6 months? Is that what it normally is?
Well,
or
no, I think 6 months is still relatively healthy. Some boards only carry about 3 months, 3 or 4 months in reserve.
Right.
So we're still in pretty good condition. I think the most important thing here is to see the trends, because you don't want to have a fiscal structural imbalance where you're bringing in less money than what you're spending. And ultimately, that's what we're going to get to, especially when we start talking about increasing the number of staff. A month in reserve is not very much money when you really think about it. It's only a little over $100,000. So I want to say something like $150,000. So that money can go away really quickly. It can be spent quickly. When we look at the revenue that's coming in, the good news is we're bringing in, we're steadily increasing our revenue. And the way this is reported is the two funds are reported separately. So we see the revenue for speech, language, pathology, and audiology on the first page. And the thing to pay attention to here are the you have 3 columns, are the month 13s. So I'm going to try my best not to make this real confusing, but the month 13s are the final account of what came in that year. So if you were to look at speech in 14-15, the total revenue is really at the bottom. It's $987,000, because that includes licensing revenue, and it also includes other types of cost recovery, which is our true revenue picture. If you look at 15-16, it increases to a little over $1 million. And then we're projected this year to bring in $1.1 million in speech, language, pathology, and audiology revenue. The same.
And again, help me out, I'm sorry, Paul.
Sure.
The revenue is primarily coming from licensing fees.
The revenue is primarily coming from renewals, yes, licensing renewal
Okay,
fees.
so this wouldn't be like cost recovery for a discipline case, or I mean, it wouldn't be like a fine or.
It could be. If you look at the 2 numbers on the bottom, you have total revenue and then you have total. Total would include other sources. Total revenue is pretty much limited to licensing renewals. If you go to that, a couple pages down to the hearing aid dispensing revenue, you can see the same thing. You have a month 13 column that shows $880,000, $943,000, and $946,000. And that's the total revenue for hearing aid dispensers. So the combined numbers, just to kind of give you a better picture, and this would have been in my written report, was that in 2015-16, or 14-15 was 1.8 million. It increased in 15-16 to 2 million, and that was an increase mostly on the speech language pathology assistant and speech language pathologist side, the increase in licensing population there. That has been projected to be steady this year, to where we're probably going to bring in about 2.1 million in revenue. But you can see that increase, and with that increase obviously comes increased workload. So that on that same topic of budgets, the board is looking at, increasing its staff, something that we've been looking at doing, so that in times like these, as we go into the licensing peak season, we're not scrambling trying to make sure that we don't keep people from working because it takes us too long to license people. So keep that in mind. That's something that we're looking at doing here in the coming months. That's something I'll be working closely with DCA staff on. We have a couple of vacancies in the office right now that we're trying to fill. 2 people that promoted, as I reported at our last meeting, and we've had some snags in trying to fill those positions, but we're working hard to do that. And that would be our administrative assistant position and one of our licensing positions. We have brought in temporary help to help us for the time being, but we need to fill those positions. Some good news is we have been working with different subject matter experts, members of our licensing population that are involved with CAPSID, that are helping us come up with improved processes to help get our licensees to work a little bit faster as they become RPEs, or as they go from RPE to licensure. And I think we've been able to present those to some of the program directors out there, and we're getting pretty good feedback on those changes. So one other thing that we're doing that I think is going to go over well for all of our licensees is we're looking into online licensing. Online renewals, online license renewals. As you know, we're still limited to our old legacy system, so a lot of the things that are available to those DCA boards that are part of Breeze, we still don't have access to. But we have talked to our IT people that have been real open to some of the concerns that we have. And one of the things that we are able to do is to get online licensing renewals. So it's a little clunky, but at least it'll help people be able to do that online and not have to go through, you know, having to, wow, do I still have a checkbook out there somewhere? I need to write a check. I need to go to the store and buy a stamp because people aren't used to writing checks and putting things in envelopes anymore. But we still require that. So with online renewals, at least they'll be able to go on and use the online renewal technology that was available in 2002, 2003. But
So is this a stopgap until we get launched into Breeze?
yes, yes, that's exactly what it is. And Jason at DCA, he's been really helpful at trying to get us some technology solutions to help us, as a stopgap until we get there. Let me go to the next page here. If you look at 6C, you have your licensing reports, and you have your hearing aid dispensers, a practical exam report. Just to give you an idea as to where we are with our licensing cycle times, we're still holding pretty strong between 1 to 3 weeks when it comes to processing applications. I believe as of last week, we were processing them within a week. For hearing aid dispensers, I think it's taken us a little bit over a week. We have another practical exam, I think, coming up, planned here in the next few weeks. Any questions so far on any of these statistical reports?
Some of them, the hearing aid dispensers, practical exam, to put percentages is really, I don't know, it's when you see that only 2 people took it and 1 person failed, it's at 50% fail rate.
Right.
It's just.
Well, I think it's
not
part of a
useful.
much it's part of a much larger spreadsheet
You
that
are
we
lucky
use.
that not 2 failed.
Yeah,
Be 100%.
I know, so
I think it's just part of an existing spreadsheet that exists for the overall data that we accumulate and that we track. But I can understand,
I want to
yeah.
understand, what is without supervision?
These are applicants that may come in that don't come in, that are not trainees.
Oh, so all the other one on the top are trainee, all 24 have been trainees?
Yes. And again, this is part of a table that
It's
we were compiling
The
data
one
for
that has not been trained are doing
overall.
much better.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah, there's some illogicality. Yeah. The moral of the story is don't get supervision, and then
you'll do better.
I actually do have data on the differences between those that were supervised and those that weren't supervised. I don't have it available with me now, but we were trying to see if there was a correlation in pass rates, and we couldn't find one that it really impacted it one way or another. I also have enforcement, the enforcement report there, enforcement statistics. We're going to be talking a little bit more about enforcement and formal discipline in closed session.
Before you go on,
Sure.
Can I go back to page 1 under the 6E tab?
Yes.
I know I'm going to sound like a cranky person because I've asked for this before, and I know it's
Yes.
a challenge. Audiology and speech-language pathology are 2 completely separate professions. And it makes me nuts to look at, and I think I've probably been yammering about this for 10 years. But it makes it very hard to really get a good picture of what's happening in my profession versus what's happening in my friend's profession or my daughter's profession, because it's a separate profession. So I think what I've heard over the years is that the computer systems don't easily allow that separation to occur, and I understand that, but I think it's an important distinction to look at what the complaints and convictions are for the 2 professions separately.
Okay.
End of cranky comment.
Well, and just to kind of touch on that, I think that as we move forward to our newer database, interestingly, it's going to actually be condensed all in one. It wouldn't even be separated by hearing aid dispensers and speech and audiology. I think right now, just kind of gathering that information would be a little tough on our staff because we're overloaded with the workload that we have. I think occasionally we can actually produce reports and give you an idea of what the trends are. I know that in the area of audiology, we don't get a large number of complaints. I did report, I think, at one conference where I kind of dissected it a little more for audiologists, and I'd be more than happy to put some time into that if that's something the board wants me to do, to dissect the types of complaints that come for each group. I can pretty much tell you off the top of my head what they are, but we could do that. That's just not something that we've had the resources to do recently.
I would just like to support what Allison's saying, because I think there's a trend that's going to come along in the next decade where speech pathology and audiology actually separate within their educational institutions. So they really will not be together anymore as communicative disorders or lumped together. So they'll be working very independently, and it seems appropriate to me that they should be separated here as well.
So maybe help me try to understand what are we trying to get from the enforcement reports? What would be helpful to you to know?
Yeah, we'd like to know, how many, what kinds of infractions, what kinds of things were happening, so that we as educators can, of course, try to intervene and not allow those things, or at least bring forth the ethics information so that people don't do things, at least to the extent we can control that within our educational programs. So knowing what the problems are, how many, we don't want to overreact, but
Right.
we'd like to know.
Okay.
And I think, to piggyback on that, I think, and I realize this is even splitting the hair even finer, so I recognize that before I even say that. There are infractions in my mind that are related to the practice of dispensing hearing aids by an audiologist. There are infractions related to the practice of audiology. So there are some distinctions there. If I'm going to supervise a staff of audiologists, I'd like to have a good sense of where the potential pitfalls are that my staff might inadvertently or deliberately or accidentally fall into. And just having those data would be really helpful in, I just think in doing process improvement, in doing any kind of an initiative with our profession, either on sort of the small level, like within my hospital, or on a large level. I think these trends are really important, and I think they're important in California. They're important, nationwide for our National Professional Association to know and to be able to address some of these issues, maybe in terms of continuing education, or a focus that we might have at our national conference. I mean, California is a big state. I don't have to tell you that. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else, any other board members have any interest in, because I think what we're looking at, it sounds like complaints that come in are all over the place, and we don't act on every complaint that comes in. As a matter of fact, I would say we act on a very small number of the complaints, because some of those are outside of our jurisdiction. Some of those have insufficient evidence or no violations. So it would seem like the information that you want to gather is important. I agree, and I think that if our enforcement information can be helpful to the profession, we want to do that. But it would seem like what we want is then to give you more of a summary of the violations that occurred. So not the complaints that come in, but the number of citations that we issued and the types of citations, the types of discipline that we've administered, and I think that's something that we could do.
I think maybe I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm every time preaching for an email of all the licensees to have to the board. And every time there is a convention, I'm not talking about complaint. There is final disposition of a case. The detail of the case will be emailed to all the licensees. And this will be the best educational tool that said, okay, this is the case, what's happened, and this was the penalty for this. So
That is published, right?
but it's published passively.
Yes.
That's right.
And what I'm talking about and there's no expense. You just push off a button to the email list. And I'll keep on preaching this.
I actually think that's a great suggestion. I mean, it's something that I
about
personally would love to
collection,
see.
and about collection of the email database should be voluntarily. In the renewal of this, it said if you want to get notices from the board, put your email there.
Yeah, I do see that happening, but I think that we would actually really like to gather that. And I know we've already talked about the legal issues involved, but even with our new database coming on, that's something that we can do. I'll give you just something positive on that, is we do have an interested parties list, and we added to that disciplinary actions. So we want to get that information out there for people to sign up for that interested parties list on our website. And what happens is, every time a disciplinary action happens, they get notification of that. But they have to actively go on and sign on to that interested parties list. So to the extent that we can get that information out there, I'm hoping that we can.
Do you actually need to ask permission, or can't you just put every licensee? No, because for the medical board, I don't recall ever saying, yeah, I'd like to receive the quarterly newsletter, and I received the quarterly newsletter that has 300. I don't recall volunteering.
Well, I think the different boards have different ways of having you indicate what level you want to be on the interested parties list. Some of them break it down, and some of them don't. But I believe you need people's permission to get there, to be sending things to their.
And they can unsubscribe anytime they want.
Well, my point was that we do have that mechanism, and it's something that I know we're going to try to maybe work with the professional associations to get that word out there, so that people can get the information at least until we get to where we want to be. And unfortunately, I do work in the world of workarounds, because we do have limitations and processes and technology, but I'm confident that we'll get there.
You can't just change, you can't just increase our licensing fees unilaterally to pay for all this?
That's another story. Let me go back to my my report. I think that's all I have. Do you have any questions concerning the EO's report or any of our operational issues? Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, I thought you had told me a while ago that the process had begun to increase fees, that this has to be a rulemaking file, and it's a 2 or 3 year process. Are we still?
We have started the process, but I think we're going to have to actually do some more as far as increasing fees. Now, one of the problems that we have is our lack of staffing. So in order to increase fees, you need a person who is dedicated to regulations. We're going to see later on in this board meeting, we're going to talk about regulations that haven't happened for years. We found some language that wasn't approved going back to 2010. And I think a part of that is that we haven't had the staff to do it. And I hate to sound like a broken record, it comes to that. But we are begging and borrowing to get these things done, and that's one of those things that we want to make sure that we do it efficiently. When you're dealing with regulations, you're dealing with the Office of Administrative Laws, and there's all these legalities and technicalities that we have to deal with. So we may need to go back, look at our fees. It may be worth our while to look at doing a fee study. That's something that we've seen more and more happening with boards, so that a lot of the burden of justifying the fee increase doesn't rest with just Karen and I and our legal counsel trying to hammer through these things. But the process did begin. I think it's going to take us some time to get there, just because, and that's what I'm working on for the next couple of, probably the next couple of months. I'm going to try to work with DCA to try to get this budget change proposal through so we can get some more staff. That's all I have on my report. Are there any questions? All right.
Okay, so we'll move to Sunset Review.
And this was a placeholder on our agenda, and the reason for this was in case there were any questions or any issues that might arise. I sent you all our responses to the Senate and the Assembly Sunset Review Committees. I sent that by email. I've gotten good feedback from most of you and been able to get a lot of information from you that helped us through this. We have our responses and some proposed language, but I have not received an update or any information from the committee consultants. And I just inquired with them probably a week before I prepared this, and I haven't heard. Any questions on the sunset process? Or the review? Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.